supplying power to it, and those had to be replaced. But since then, it's been working just fine as it's been operational. I've seen it operating a couple of times. But again, this was kind of on into the project, so the amount of time we had to spend on it was not that great. And also, at the beginning, just to get, we didn't even really know this, but the oven supplies analog signals to a card. There's a card inside of a control box. And that's just the control. This one over here is where it's connected now. I mean, it was unused at the time. It was just a dangling cable that didn't really go anywhere, but now it is supplying power to our oven. And here's what I'm talking about, in that the oven supplies, and the strain gauge supplies signals to this row of inputs. These are analog, and the card inside the computer could not actually read those. We disconnected it from the card there. That would be fine, but at the beginning, when they installed this card up here, which you can see, it takes this analog cable and it is shredded, separated into individual wires and wired into the digital card, which then sends the signal down to the computer where it can interpret the inputs and outputs. And then there is the first major subsystem, which I've already touched on the controls, the actual water valve feed system. Those are 8 valves which are connected to solenoid switches that can be opened or closed by software. And they're intended, the idea is that you have a pan of sand. You would hang it from the strain gauges, you would zero it, and then you could control and add water. And you could look at the graph to see how much water you add, and then heat in the oven could see what the change in that mass is. And also there's little, on that leading out of the solenoid switches, there's little needle valves which manually adjust the control of flow rate, but you obviously don't want it shooting water too fast into your hands, or you would overflow. These are the actual valves underneath the table where the computer is at. These are like the solenoid switches. This is probably valve 6. See a little needle valve. There's a rotating valve here. And also, you can't see it in this picture, but there was a big bucket sitting there with a pump attached. And apparently the way it was set up last was to fill water from the house supply into the bucket, and then you activated the pump, and the pump supplied the pressure to the valves. But in between Friday and Wednesday, that has been removed. The bucket and the pump are not there anymore. It's connected directly to the water. But then that proved to be too much water pressure. The solenoid switches are designed to operate at low pressures, and so a pressure regulator had to be attached. And the last I checked, it was working. Everything was working just fine. It's a more direct way to supply the water to begin with. And this is the inside of the oven. You can see these are the arms. There's 8 of these. They're arranged longest from front to back. There's 4 top, 4 on the bottom. There's a pan hanging from one of them. You see the snaking of the copper tubing. You can take the tubing to bend them to position them anywhere you want to, so that you can hang the pan anywhere. Or if you wanted to use it as just a drying oven, which kind of bend them out of the way, that we can get crazy. This is just crushed conduit that was already in the oven that we could use to make rails if you wanted to put trays of some other material to dry into the oven. And then the strain gauge system was one of the earliest systems that we actually did get operational, so we were able to actually calibrate those, because the way a strain gauge works is that you apply strain to it and it registers a change in voltage, and then sends that to the strain gauge amplifier, which is read by the computer. But we wanted it to output in grams. That just seemed to be the most useful measurement. And so what we did is that he created a place, Chase did, inside the software, so that it had so each signal was going across a multiplier. We set that multiplier to 1, and then used weights. The calibration weights that are used for the balances of 100, 200, and 400 grams, and then calibrated using 4 points of the calibrated with 4 points from that output, and plotted it to get slopes. And this is an example of a plot. This is the first one that we did for gauge 2. And all we really need is the slope. The y intercept doesn't really mean anything in this case, but the slope will allow us to convert the reading of the strain gauge to the actual mass. And then we entered that slope, replaced the 1 with that slope, and it was accurate to within easily within a gram. So all our slopes gave us a R² value of 1. So we feel like we did a pretty good calibration on those. Didn't include all the plots, that would be a fair number of plots. These are all of the slopes that we got for each one. And 8 was not operational. It was not giving us a clear signal at the time, but I think that has actually been resolved, so that one could be calibrated now. As far as limitations in this project, easily the biggest one is just I had no idea what to do with lab heat when I started this. It's like we were assigned to work on the ovens, Jessica and I back then, and I had no idea that it would turn into what it did. But the lack of lab view knowledge definitely held me back from being able to contribute as much to working on the software as I would have liked. And also, just from the electrical problems and the software problems, it was a way more complex and time-consuming project than I had any idea to suspect. And so it clearly would not have succeeded as well as it did without Dr. Henry and Chase Williams. As far as conclusions, I mean, the biggest one is just that it is an operational oven. Everything seems to work just fine. All the major systems seem to be operational. We've done some fair amount of testing. It heated up just fine. It actually heats up a good deal faster than the current drying oven. So once there are some more, he's still working on the software, so he needs to be complete. There are some issues that are still being resolved. One of the biggest ones that he was still working on was that normally when an oven, you set a temperature, it'll heat